Oh no, this is pretty solid.
Yeah?
Yeah. Beautiful. This is actually not the first time I've crossed a little oxbow channel like this. Keep coming up. There's animal tracks here too.
Okay, so we're in good company.
Yeah. Sure, so we're on the Hemlock Hill conservation lands. So this was formerly protected in 2015. So we've been doing outreach to this river for more than 10 years, talking to people, identifying the most important sites that have some of the most rare and threatened ecosystems and species on it. And this land, this forest here is long known to residents and to people working in conservation as having this really fabulous old growth forest on it. So the opportunity came up to work with the landowner, who is a forester. He had been doing some cutting on his property and was thinking about cutting this area, but also talked to us about whether we wanted to purchase it from him. And purchasing is a big endeavor, and so we launched a very public campaign to try to protect the property. We did our homework to see if it had the characteristics that we look for, and it does. So sometimes when people think of old growth forests, they just think old. How old are the trees? The older the better. And the trees in this stand are old by current Nova Scotia standards, so the average age of the large trees is 140 years old. But we also really wanted to look for structure and function. So are some of the characteristics here of old forests? And there are, you can see right here, here's a young hemlock, so there's young spruce and hemlock coming up in the canopy, waiting for their turn, waiting for their shaft of light to try to come up when there's a gap in the canopy. There's quite a diversity of mosses and ferns here that are associated with old forests. Wildlife use this property that are associated with old forests. Lichens, there's a rare lichen here that's pretty abundant in this stand. So all of the elements are here to point to that this is a pretty legitimate old growth forest. And so we put the call out to Nova Scotians saying this is a part of our natural heritage and we have a chance to protect it. Do you want to work with us? And people really responded well, and we were able to raise the funds and protect the property. And now it's our responsibility to care for it forever. And it's also an opportunity for Nova Scotians to come out here where you can access our lands, you can come experience the sort of majesty of this stand. And we lead guided walks here and we tell people how to get here. So it's here now forever. So this is a great example of a cavity, which is a feature, a structural feature that you would find in old forests. So the cavity was probably made by a woodpecker after the tree died. It would have pecked away to try to find bugs inside, possibly successful. Regardless, it leaves a hole that other species can't make, but then can use. So cavities like this are used by more than 50 wildlife species in Nova Scotia, but unfortunately we have less cavities on the landscape than we used to have, because we have a tendency not to leave trees to get really old and big so that they create a cavity. And then we have sometimes an approach of cleaning up the forest by taking out snags and deadwood, because we want to leave room for other growth. But without those cavities, then we lose some of our cavity nesters. And some of the species that are challenged by not finding cavities are things like pine marten and barred owls in the past. There was fewer barred owls because there was not as many cavities for them to nest in, and now we've been able to improve that through nest boxes. But this is a feature that would be great to bring back on the landscape because it's really well used. Yeah, so what's really exciting about this is called coral lichen, which is a not super common lichen in Nova Scotia. You could find it on individual old trees, but when you find it on a high number of trees, it's a good indicator species that you're in a true old growth forest. So there's an ecologist in Nova Scotia named Rob Cameron who wrote a paper that found that you might find here and there in a sort of older forest, but when you find it on a certain proportion of the trees, like I think it's 70% or higher, then you probably have an old forest. So I see it here in this stand, I see it over there, I see it over there, and that's great. So say one individual tree dies from pest or infection or something like that, it might fall down and the lichen might die, but then there are other trees around that can populate new trees as they get old enough to sustain the lichen. So finding a bunch of coral lichen like all over in the stand was a really exciting find.
So is it vulnerable to air pollution, or does it just have very specific habitat requirements?
Both. So lichens get their nutrients from the air, so they're all sensitive to the things that we put in the air. You would not find this in the city. That would be too polluted, as it is for a lot of lichens. So it's fairly uncommon, but where you do see it in high proportion and has the right habitat requirements is in these old growth stands. It's got the right humidity in here, it's got the right nutrient regime in the air, it's got the right substrate to live on, these old hemlocks. So all of the elements are right for this lichen here.